Welcome to Godless Bitches. I'm your host, Beth Presswood, here with Jen Peeples.
Hi, everybody.
And Tracie Harris.
Hello.
Godless Bitches is a podcast of the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational group dedicated to the separation of church and state and the promotion of positive atheism. The ACA also sponsors the Atheist Experience TV show and podcast and the Nonprofits podcast. You can contact GB using bitches at atheist-community.org, and you can comment on shows at godlessbitches.podbean.com. In other announcements, we have the Bat Cruise Extravaganza Weekend going on September 22nd and 23rd. We will have a talk by Teresa McBain, who you've heard on here. The Bat Cruise with the largest urban bat population. And then Sunday, you can do all the regular events like the brunch, a live taping of the Atheist Experience, and El Arroyo. Or whatever restaurant we're at, we might change. You never know. All right, so got all that out of the way. How is everybody?
Oh, pretty good.
Doing good.
I'm back from Ohio.
Uh-huh. What were you doing there?
I was doing some work up there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well,
yeah,
it's glad to have you not on hotel Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, I was actually dialing in on Skype over my cell phone's connection. But anyway, it didn't work out very well. So I have to come up with a better plan for when I'm on the road.
Yeah, I don't think the phones are all that good. Just depends. Well, I've got a lot for you today. By the way, I'm echoing a little bit on somebody's. It's kind of weird.
Oh,
I've got headphones on.
Okay. So, Vagina.
Don't say that.
I have now interrupted the decorum of this podcast by saying vagina. So, in case you don't know what that was about, a state representative in Michigan, Lisa Brown, gave a talk about this huge abortion bill that had pretty much every restriction you could possibly shoehorn into it. And while doing so, she ended with, "Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'm all so flattered you're interested in my vagina, but no means no." And they went crazy. They basically did silence her for a day, a timeout, as Jen was calling it earlier. But yes, and I've seen a lot of very cool responses to this. You know, if you can't say it, don't legislate it, and other things. But yeah, vagina. I don't know.
Never mind the fact that the word vagina appears, I believe it's 3 times in the Michigan
legislation.
Code. Yeah, in the legislation that they have in there. So, you know, if it actually disrupts the decorum of the legislature, then why did they write it into Michigan law on 3 separate occasions?
I mean, that's what it's called, though. That's the appropriate word.
Well, exactly. And so I think they're waffling on some strange twist that it was the way she used it or the context in which she used it that was so disruptive. But
yeah, actually legislating it isn't disruptive. But this turned into a whole thing with Eve Ensler even came up there, and they did the vagina monologues on the Capitol steps. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But one of the guys, I'm trying to find this quote, but one of her fellow representatives says, "I wouldn't say what she said in mixed company."
Grow up.
Yeah, really. Junior high is over.
This is what it's called. It's not a foul word. It's the appropriate label for a body part. Like if you said hand.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even know. It's not like she went up there and said pussy and cunt and
I wonder what he thinks, like, if there's like a gynecological convention, how does he think the mixed company speaks to one another? Like, what kind of language does he think they use, if they can't say vagina?
The whole thing about mixed company, that you don't say some things when
You should never
women are
say
around.
vagina in front of a woman. I think that's the thing. I don't know what that
Women
is.
have vaginas usually. Yeah. You can't say what they have.
Don't sully my ears with my other body parts.
Oh.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it completely ridiculous.
She could just as well have made the same statement and instead said, "If you're that interested in my body," and would that have been would that have been offensive as well? Because that would have been the same statement. If it was the statement that she was making that was offensive, then would she have been banned for making that same statement and using the word body? Because that means exactly the same thing.
Well, as this developed over the past few days, I think someone did say, one of the other legislators, and I don't have all the stories up, I'm sorry, said that it was because she talked about her religion. Which, if they're going to say that you go into timeout for talking about your religion in the House, wow, everybody's going to be tossed out.
Well, and the important thing to know is that when she was talking about her religion, she was making the point that she didn't think it was appropriate for people to start legislating their religious beliefs, that she wasn't bringing her religious beliefs in there and forcing other people to adhere to her beliefs. And she didn't think it was appropriate for her fellow legislators to be doing that with people that didn't agree with them. And so the point she was making about religion was spot on. There was nothing offensive about it.
Well, yeah, and she was Jewish. She is Jewish, and she was talking about, in some sects of Judaism at least, the woman's life is more important than the fetus's life. To the point where if your life is threatened, if the woman, she has to have an abortion.
Right.
It's required. So they want to talk about, religion this, religion that. You would be infringing on some people's practice of religion if you banned abortion.
That's an interesting point.
Not that I think religion should really come into it at all, but,
Well, but it does. Any religion comes into it anytime you start infringing on it. At that point, then at least you have to look at what's happening, because you're not supposed to be infringing. It's like there are instances where you can't help it or where it's required, based on what's going on. But at the same time, if you're doing some kind of legislation and it starts to go over into religious practice, you do have to kind of stop and look at that and make sure that you're not infringing on freedom of religion. Yeah,
well, you can infringe on freedom of religion, but it has to be for a damn good reason. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Protecting kids from faith healing and shit. Yeah.
So it would matter. In the case of passing legislation that starts to infringe, it is a legitimate concern when someone says, hey, wait a minute, this is trampling my religion. Then you do have to kind of look at it and say, okay, well, what's going on here? Is this trampling your religion? Is this a problem? It at least has to be examined. So I do think it's a relevant concern when it comes to religion and legislation, when somebody is saying this is infringing on a religious freedom.
Yeah.
I think that's a legitimate point to raise regarding religion and legislation.
Yeah. All right. So, do y'all have any stories y'all wanted to bring up?
Well, I had something I came across. It's actually from Natural News, so it's
yay.
Yeah, it's an anti-vaxxer website. So anyway, this claim from Natural News is that vaccinated children have up to 500% more disease than unvaccinated children.
Really?
Yeah. So basically, the the study or this information is coming from an ongoing survey study that was initiated by the classical homeopathist Andreas Bachmeier. So that's the words from the article here. So basically, a homeopath is doing a study that confirms what he already believes. Are we surprised? No, we're not.
What are the parameters of this study? I mean, where's he getting these kids and everything?
Well, he's getting them from the German National Health Study. The German National Health Care System is actually quite good, and they have really good records of who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. And so that's where he's getting the information, I guess, on who's vaccinated and who's not. But I believe, if I am reading this correctly, participation in this study is voluntary. And he's actually opened up the survey to U.S. parents. So he's got over 1,100 respondents outside of his original survey group in Germany, 11,000 respondents. They're mostly from the U.S. Let's see. And basically what it's saying is that they're comparing the vaccination rates to some common childhood illnesses, and they're finding, according to this, that the rate of illness in unvaccinated children is 2 to 5 times less, according to this. I'm sure they're discounting the vaccine preventable diseases that these kids are getting.
Yeah. What illnesses are these? Do they even say?
Well, they mention asthma as one of them, and I did see this in here. Let me see if I can find it in here. But okay. So asthma, recurring tonsillitis, chronic bronchitis, sinusitis, allergies, eczema, ear infections, diabetes, sleep disorders, bedwetting, dyslexia, migraines, hyperactivity, ADD, epilepsy, depression, and slower development of speech or motor skills.
Bedwetting might be a problem, but unless it's caused by something physical, I don't think it's a disease.
Yeah.
It would be a symptom of something. It wouldn't be a disease.
Yeah, well, and bedwetting is kind of when something is called, labeled bedwetting as opposed to, normal development is it kind of varies depending on who you're talking to and how much they know about how children develop normally. Because nighttime, continence, if you will, doesn't really develop until kids are around 3 years old. There's not really, it's just a neurological maturity thing. There's not really anything you can do to accelerate it. But sometime around 3 years old, kids develop the ability to, delay going to the bathroom until they wake up and get to the toilet. And so even if you've got a kid that's completely potty trained during the day, they may still wet the bed at night.
Sure.
Until they're, at that point. And so, there's not really any way you can predict in advance exactly when that's going to happen. So, when it gets labeled as bedwetting, I think, probably by the time the kid's in kindergarten, if you've got a kid that's still wetting the bed, that might be a cause for concern.
It would still be a symptom of something else.
Exactly.
The wetting of the bed would not be the physical disorder. It would be something symptomatic, I would think. I mean,
right. Yeah. I don't know of anyone who looks at bedwetting and says, that's the disease itself. You're right. It's a symptom of something else that's happening.
The only things that really interest me would be the things about asthma and allergies and other immune reactions. That could be an interesting thing to study. There are lots of confounders, though. I mean, these anti-vaxxers in the U.S. are primarily higher socioeconomic status.
Yeah, exactly.
And asthma is actually more common in lower socioeconomic status due to, where people live and bad buildings and tenements and, other stuff. Plus, a lot of these crazy anti-vaxxers are also the kind of people who do lots of crunchy stuff like, farming and having animals, even if they're not way out in the country. And exposure to things like that is actually correlated with lower allergies and asthma. It's the hygiene hypothesis.
Yeah,
These people are all into natural stuff, including, letting the kids crawl around and eat dirt and stuff. That in itself is actually, good for preventing allergies.
Yeah, well, and, you were talking about the kids on the lower socioeconomic scale that, they tend to have things like asthma and bronchitis and stuff like that. Well, that's also related to some things that you see more often in lower income families, like parents that work in more hazardous conditions, and they come home with these contaminants on their clothing. Or, parents who smoke. People who are better educated and make more money tend to not smoke as much.
Well, just out of curiosity, isn't asthma and allergy a hyperimmune reaction?
That's complex.
Yeah.
It is, but it's an immune reaction to the wrong things. The hygiene hypothesis is basically, and this is kind of simplified, if your immune system doesn't have any actual diseases to fight, it will go against harmless things like peanuts or pollen or things like that.
Yeah. So that's why exposure to animals is beneficial, because it basically gives your immune system something to do. And it kind of teaches it the difference between harmful stuff and non-harmful stuff.
Yeah, your immune system goes through a period of, I don't want to say learning, but things that you are exposed to when you are very young are the things that your immune system learns to tolerate. And things that are introduced later, it's going to attack.
But I found the ear infections claim very interesting, because one of the vaccines in the vaccine series now is for the Haemophilus influenza B, which is not influenza like the flu. It's actually a bacterial infection, and it causes a lot of ear infections. And those ear infections that are caused by this particular bacteria can lead to meningitis. And so one of the reasons that vaccinated kids now that present to a pediatrician's office with an ear infection, an acute ear infection, unless there's fever or severe pain or some other indications that the kid needs antibiotics, pediatricians typically don't treat ear infections with antibiotics anymore. They'll typically tell you to treat, the discomfort. And if there's mild fever, that's okay. And basically let the kid's immune system deal with the ear infection, which is beneficial because now you've exposed the kids to fewer antibiotics. So there's little opportunity for a penicillin allergy or, some kind of antibiotic allergy to develop. And you don't have this, these antibiotic resistant strains developing when people don't use them appropriately. So less use of antibiotics goes hand in hand with more use of appropriate vaccinations.
Yes. Yes.
That's why you rarely see cases of kids developing meningitis from their ear infections anymore as well. There's lots of pediatricians out there who started practicing in the last 10 years who have never seen a kid with meningitis that came from an ear infection.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's so rare now because of the vaccines.
Oh, yeah, and it used to kill them, like, all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, and not, like, in the 50s. Like,
Right.
in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly when it came out, but yeah. I'm getting a lot of echo on somebody's. I don't know what's happening.
I've got headphones on, so I don't know what would cause it here.
I don't know. I'll try to work with it.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't have enough antibiotics. They are not going to last us. Everything is going to get resistant to everything, and I, for one, welcome our new bacterial overlords. Whatever. Yeah. We need to create vaccines.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. I don't even know what to say to anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
Except
Well,
you're killing
and
all of us.
I guess a final note on this vaccination thing. There's one. It lists a whole bunch of different surveys that are out there on vaccinated versus unvaccinated, but this last one is really telling about the methodology that's used in some of these surveys. And I'll read you a quote here from the article. It says, "Perhaps the most informal grassroots survey going on now is by Tim O'Shea, D.C., author of Vaccination is Not Immunization. He simply has non-vaccinating parents email him with comparisons of their children's health to friends and families they know with vaccinated children." So, yes.
I think the thing that frustrates me the most about this is that we've already run the experiment for like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years where we lived without vaccines.
Yeah.
We know how that plays out.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that everybody was really happy when vaccines were developed. And
Yeah.
I mean, we've tried it without them, and lots and lots and lots and lots of people died horrible, horrible deaths or were incapacitated for life in ways that were just, horrible. People that were deaf, like went deaf from, you had typhus, you had rheumatic fever, you had, all kinds of things, polio.
Yeah.
Horrible, horrible stuff. And I feel it takes so little time for society to forget how horrible things were. I grew up, and sometimes I just feel ancient, but I know it's only been, like, it's just another generation. But, like, there's a generation after me that doesn't have relatives who are in a wheelchair from polio, who were deaf from a fever when they were little, who, you just don't see that anymore. And,
right.
and I think when they hear this anti-vax rhetoric, they think to themselves, oh, this sounds good, or this makes sense, or maybe there's something to it. And it's like, when I grew up, I was seeing all of the ravages of the stuff from people that didn't have these vaccines. I mean, this is not that long ago.
My mom was born in 1958. My grandmother contracted rubella when she was pregnant. My mom was born deaf. And in fact, there was a fairly large epidemic, I think, in the early 60s. And she has a lot of deaf friends that are deaf because of congenital rubella. And the vaccine
I had
was
an
only
aunt with
developed in the late 60s. She missed it by, a few years.
I mean, we had a president who was in a wheelchair for polio.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that this not vaccinating has been done already, and it worked like shit.
Yeah. Well, that and the people that were not vaccinated weren't vaccinated because they were crunchy granola and they made this choice not to do it. They weren't vaccinated because the vaccines didn't exist, and as soon as they did, I mean, they flocked to get their kids vaccinated because they didn't want their kids, going to school with classmates who had, polio and who couldn't walk anymore, or, who suffered some terrible complication from measles, which was very common. Measles is not a benign disease. And I mean, I remember having chicken pox when I was a kid. And that was about as close to perfect misery as you can imagine. And I remember being in this daycare center, and at the time, you know, people were bringing their kids by and dropping them off for a day so they could contract, you know, chicken pox, you know, over the summer when it was convenient and they'd get it out of the way. And so there were just, you know, it was a room full of kids laying on mats, spotted kids, you know, with little pink dots of calamine lotion all over these itchy bumps, you know, and that was reality back before the chickenpox vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I even had chicken pox. I don't remember it very much, but I'm sure it sucked. My uncle had chicken pox as an adult.
That's pretty bad.
Oh my God. He nearly was hospitalized.
Yeah.
It's very severe as an adult. So, yeah, get your fucking shots.
Yeah.
That's all we have to say on that.
Yeah, and I mean, even if it were true that a kid with vaccinations is more prone to allergies, let me just tell the parents out there, it's better than polio. If the trade-off were demonstrated to be your kid might get allergies, but he won't get polio, get the polio vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's the better, you know, the worst of the two evils.
Yeah. All right. Well, my next story is something that has just blown up all across the blogosphere. An atheist blogger converted to Catholicism. This is this story I'm actually getting from Catholic.org, although it's been all over. Leah Libresco has a Patheos blog, and I'd never heard of her before this.
I was about to say her name as though I knew who it was, like not the Leah Libresco.
Yeah, and I guess that's sort of snarky. But the thing is, the Catholics and other Christians are trumpeting this, like, we got a famous atheist blogger, and I hadn't heard of her, so she clearly can't be that famous. Yes, that was sort of bitchy.
Well, I mean, no, I haven't read her blog, so I mean, I don't know if she was making good arguments or what the reality is of why she would have done this or what her reasoning capacity was previously. I mean, it may have been a decent blog. I don't know. You know, like I say, I don't know who she is. But if we're going to just take random people from religion, for example, and say, you know, is this a numbers game? Because frankly, we've got people deconverting in droves from religion. Atheism is like one of the fastest, or non-religious, I guess it is like one of the fastest growing groups in the U.S. right now. It's like people are just abandoning religion. And, you know, we get letters all the time. From people just saying like, oh, okay, I saw the light. So I mean, if it's about you being able to say, hey, an atheist, you know, join the ranks, it's like, well, almost everything we've got, we have. I would bet if we did a random poll, we'd get far more deconverted atheists than people raised without religion.
Yeah. When they get somebody, it's a major event because it is so rare. Yeah,
and with us, it's like every day. Every day we're getting religious people saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe I believed this, and I'm so glad that I, you know, finally found some reason.
Yeah. So apparently,
what's the story?
Well, she does have a significant other that is religious, which may or may not have played a role. This is a quote from her. She finally accepted the notion that truth and moral goodness come from God. I believed that the moral law wasn't just a platonic truth, abstract and distant. It turns out I actually believed it was some kind of person as well as truth. And there was one religion that seemed like the most promising way to reach back to that living truth.
Islam. No, Hindu?
No.
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 Sikhism?
No.
No. Ancestor worship.
Animism?
Wait, I don't know.
I asked my friend what he suggests we do now, and we prayed the night office of the Liturgy of the Hours together, which is apparently some
Is that Masonic?
Catholic thing.
Oh, yeah, I do that all the time. Yeah.
Yes. Labresco admits she struggles with some aspects of her newfound Catholic faith, among them the Church's teaching about homosexuality. But she seems set on a path to explore these specified issues as diligently as she has the overarching existence of a higher power.
So
If she thinks she has a problem with the homosexuality thing, wait till she hits the birth control thing.
Yeah, she's not married, I don't think, so gotta stop that sexing.
I like the idea that somebody is one of their main points in converting is the idea that, oh, this accounts for my morality. And the first issue that comes up that they have a problem with is one where they're saying, I don't understand why gay would be immoral. It's like, so immediately it's like this is where the moral law that I believe my morality comes from here, and yet my morality conflicts with this already. Right? It's like, do they not see the irony in that?
Yeah, and we saw how long Patrick Green lasted when he came up against the gay thing.
You know what? They can have Patrick Green.
Yes, I know.
Am I going to get sued if I say that, or we have to block that out?
No. We'll just leave it. Fuck it. One big thing I want to say, this actually happened on a thread of mine, was 3 or 4 people saying she wasn't a true atheist. No.
Don't even go there. Don't go there. Not every atheist is an atheist for good reasons. I mean, that's just reality. It's not. I know it doesn't make everybody happy, but it's true.
Well, yeah, and I came in on another post about this on Beth's wall, and somebody had made a comment about that, and I said, okay, let's not, overreact because nobody's making that argument here. And I didn't know that someone had actually done that before, but I will say that there's a couple of differences when a Christian says, oh, you're an atheist now, but you were never a true Christian, versus, if we look at someone and say, well, someone, for example, like Lee Strobel, who, I have serious doubts the guy was ever an atheist. And part of the difference comes with the definition. We've got a consistent, coherent definition of what it means to be an atheist. If you don't believe the claim that a God exists, you're an atheist. Christians can't even agree amongst themselves what makes someone a, quote, true Christian. So, for them to say, oh, you weren't a true Christian, I mean, that's almost a meaningless statement, except for the fact that it's a logical fallacy, of course. But
right. I mean, but the irony is how many deconverted Christians there are who used to look at other deconverted Christians and think they weren't true Christians.
Well, exactly.
And then until it happened to them. And then it's like, oh my gosh, now I understand, because in my mind, I was the true Christian. I was the one who believed this, like totally had my life devoted to this and was, certain of it, had no doubts, was, completely confirmed in my head. And now, and then I hit this thing I couldn't answer. I started looking into it, and suddenly the whole damn ball unraveled. Yeah. And wow, I was wrong. And then it's like, you can't accept when you're on the Christian side of that it could possibly be correct that the person was wrong. And so, it's easier to just say, well, clearly they weren't committed to begin with. And it's like, wow. And they'll say that about people like Dan Barker, even, who are just, clearly were completely devoted to it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I would say is that, given all the different experiences people have, and the fact that, as we've noted, not everybody is an atheist for good reasons. And if you were deconverted for bad reasons, you can be reconverted for equally bad reasons. And so, given that, I would say that, it would really be extraordinary to find that no atheist has ever reconverted. So, I don't find this to be a particularly extraordinary event.
Well, the other question is, like with this blogger, I mean, okay, tell me what convinced you beyond you didn't understand how social animals evolved.
Yeah.
Is there something more to it? Do you actually have a God you can demonstrate yet, or did you convert without evidence? Did you just simply say evidence is not needed and I'll just convert? I'll believe it without the evidence to support it. Because morality, you're talking about something social species develop, and you can demonstrate a difference between asocial species and social species, and you can actually breed them, which I keep, harping on the silver fox experiment because it's a great example of showing how an animal can be bred to be more social and to be more interactive and more it identifies more with others and starts to consider others and factor others into what it does. Whereas before it was just aggressive to anything but other. So you can actually breed moral tendencies into a species.
Well, and many of us live in households that have living examples of that with our dogs and cats.
Right, those would be animals that have that capacity. What's interesting to me about the silver fox experiment is that it's not just a difference between there are moral species and non-moral species, but it shows that you can actually read morality. And that B should demonstrate that it's a physical trait, not a God-given divine mystery.
Right. Yeah, I guess my point was that, in the case of dogs, we took essentially descendants of wolves and taught them to accept humans as part of their pack.
Sure. Yeah.
And then,
but a wolf is a social being to begin with.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure from a Christian perspective, that's what I would be thinking, is that it's a social animal to start with. But you can take with the silver fox an example of something that's not a social animal, and it becomes a social animal after not too many generations.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, your dialogue on, if I can crisscross the shows, on Atheist Experience, where you were hitting morality and somebody was asking about fruit flies. And you were trying to explain to the caller that some species don't evolve at the same rate. It depends on the pressures and it depends on their reaction to those pressures.
Right.
So you have this thing like a shark that hasn't evolved much in many, 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 a very long time because it was a good design early on. And you have something like a bat that works the same way. Good design early on, doesn't change much. But with the silver fox, it was kind of what that guy was looking for. It showed in just a few generations. I mean, it wasn't like an example of fruit flies where he was going on and on about the hundreds of thousands of years or whatever it was. Whatever the time span was that he kept quoting. And I kept thinking, within one human lifetime, we saw a move from an asocial animal that looked completely different than what was produced during the lifetime of a single human breeder. And at the end of that experiment, you have something that doesn't even look like the species that you started with, and it behaves completely differently, and it has an entirely different social bent to it that it didn't have before. You changed the behavior of the innate behavior of the animal, not like training it to be different, but you literally took an animal that couldn't be trained and you turned it into something that can work with people and is very, happy to work with people and non-aggressive. And it acts like a dog. I mean, and before it was just like this wild, aggressive, crazy thing that you couldn't even touch. It blows my mind that that's in one lifetime. But I think that the guy on Atheist Experience, that was what he wasn't getting, was the concept that some species are just not going to change a lot because that kind of pressure is not on them and they're a good design currently. But if something is if pressure is put on it, like sufficient pressure is put on it, they weren't even trying to do what they did. That was the big thing with silver fox, is that you ended up with something so completely beyond what they had even dreamt of doing. All they wanted actually the same thing with the same pelt, only easier to handle. So they were just trying to breed for passivity, and they got something that doesn't even have the same pelt. And it was ironic because they wanted the pelts because these are animals they breed for the fur trade. So it was bizarre that they just ended up with something that was like a dog. And they were just like, what the hell is this? What is this litter? What? It doesn't even look consistent with the pelts that were, that are every other one of these has. Totally different animal.
Yeah, I wish I had thought to mention the silver fox experiment just for
that guy was frustrating. But this is
morphological traits.
This is Godless Bitches, and that whole point was just to say that this woman, if she's bringing up morality as the reason that she converted her, she's thinking it's some divine mystery. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think now we will go into, I need to talk about this argument that some people on Facebook and others are using, and then go from there on to a very interesting story about a blogger who's decided to go after me. So, there's this argument that goes, if you don't like abortion, don't have one.
Sure.
That is a bad pro-choice argument. The thing about the anti-choicers is that when they are trying to argue, they are arguing that abortion is actually a moral evil, that it's murder or something akin to murder.
Sure.
You would not say, well, if you don't like slavery, just don't have slaves. Because that doesn't fix the fact that there are moral injustices being done to other humans. Now, there's lots of reasons why abortion doesn't fit that. But
Sure.
You cannot just say, if you just don't like this moral injustice that's happening, you just don't do it yourself and don't worry about what other people are doing. That's a crappy argument. Pro-choicers shouldn't use it. Well, there's an anti-choicer out there that agrees with me. And she wrote on her blog that she did. Her blog is a little more sentient, and her name is Anna. And her blog post, her latest blog post, which names me explicitly, is bodily rights is not a superior pro-abortion argument. There are some pro-choicers, however, a minority in my personal observation, that acknowledge the humanity of the unborn and maintain their pro-choice position. One such person is atheist Beth Presswood. She encourages her fellow pro-choicers to steer away from common faulty comebacks to pro-lifers, who she refers to as anti-choicers. For example, the tactic, don't like abortion, don't have one. She shows the weakness of this tactic by posing a parallel one that is rhetorically employed by pro-lifers, don't like slavery, don't own a slave. She also maintains that the personhood of the unborn is irrelevant to the abortion debate and that a winning case for the pro-choice position can and should be made strictly on the basis of the bodily rights argument. No one has the right to use another person's body without his or her consent. Yeah.
I'm with you so far.
It is quite easy to respond to this argument, and she has a couple other posts that are just as bad as this one. Number 1, concerning the disregard for personhood status. Women are human persons and bodily rights are a function of personhood. If personhood is irrelevant, so are bodily rights. Cannot have your cake and eat it too.
No, that's not. No, because what you're saying isn't that okay, what you're saying is that the fetus can be granted personhood and have those rights, and it won't matter. You're not saying its rights can be stripped because you can strip the rights of a person. So she's misunderstanding that point.
Yes, she's completely misunderstanding.
The point is not you can strip the rights of a person because the rights of a person don't matter. The point is that even if you have personhood and rights, that doesn't extend to the right to use someone else's body. So your personhood and your rights are irrelevant when your desire is to use another person as a human incubator.
Right. Number 2, concerning the bodily rights argument, which is an appeal to legal consistency, a counter bodily rights argument can be asserted. No one has the right to willfully kill an innocent human life. That is,
Sure.
No one has the right to knowingly, intentionally, and fatally injure the body of an innocent human being.
As long as they're not imposing on you, because I do have the right to kill you if you come into my house and steal my television and I catch you while you're in my house.
Yes.
So I can kill she's saying innocent, but if somebody's imposing on my rights, then they're not innocent. So if somebody's using my body as an incubator and I have not consented to that, that would be imposing on me, and I can stop that. And if you die because I deny you the capacity to impose upon my rights, that's not innocent. You may not have another choice, and it may be simply the situation that nature has put you in, but the fact is that's unfortunate for you.
Right. So that was one blog post. This is another. I'm not sure this is anything I'm quoted in, but who's pouring something?
That would be me.
Did you need a drink after that?
I need a drink just to do this show. Are you kidding?
So another. This is a comment on a Facebook thread. The whole personhood issue is a red herring. There is no law that forces anyone to give one drop of their blood to save another person's life. Why does a woman have to give up her body then? Why does the fetus have more rights than a full-grown woman?
Right.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with whoever she quoted. These are hers. False attempt at equivalence. It is a fundamentally flawed analogy to compare legal protection of unborn children with compulsory donation of blood or organs. No one is asserting that a woman should be forced to have her uterus removed and then donated. The law is capable of both keeping intact the uterus of a woman and protecting the life of her unborn child.
It's irrelevant. You can't use my body without my consent. It doesn't matter if I get to, and part of, I've used that argument myself where somebody said something about sharing the organs with the child. And I said, I never share, it's my organs. It never stopped being my organs. And that's the point. They're my organs and you can only use them if I consent to it. Nobody can use my organs without my consent. And it doesn't matter if you take them away, and it doesn't matter if you just borrow them, and it doesn't matter if you're just, hanging on. And I know people hate the word parasite, but I'm sorry, if I latch onto someone else's body and start using their organs to support my own existence, that's parasitic. That's what the word means. And you don't have a right to parasitize someone else's body without their consent.
Well, and not only that, but, part of the reason, the blood donation thing is kind of compelling, that, you can't be compelled to donate even a drop of blood to save your own child's life.
Correct.
After they're born. Why should you be compelled?
After they're born.
Why should you be compelled to use your body to sustain their life before they're born? Right. And so part of the reason, the blood donation thing is so compelling is because it's much less of an imposition.
Absolutely.
Than using a woman's body without her consent. If you strap my arm down and take a pint of my blood, in less than 60 days, I'm going to make another pint of blood to replace it. It's not going to be.
And in one day, you won't miss it, and it'll be done in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It won't take 9 months. You won't be unable to drive and not be able to sleep every night because and risking all kinds of weirdness with complications to your pregnancy. And this is insane to say that donating a drop of blood represents like a worse imposition and like such a greater imposition on someone's bodily autonomy than freaking using them as a human incubator for almost a year.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
How can somebody, it's like, yes, I do get what she's saying. You're not taking it away, but that's an irrelevancy. You cannot use my body. A person could rape me and you could say they didn't keep it. They didn't keep your uterus. You still used my body without my consent, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's worse. I mean, I wouldn't say it's worse if fetuses just ran off with your uterus. You might actually have wanted that. But if you didn't want to use your uterus and they went off and just took it, that would actually be a lot better than them hanging around in there for 9 months, bothering you the whole time.
Right. But if a child needed to be, for whatever reason, like hooked to an adult for a certain period of time in order to survive, should the law endorse that because this is a child?
Well, and that raises an interesting question, because if a woman is obligated to give up her body during pregnancy, is she, according to this argument, similarly obligated to breastfeed the child, until the child no longer needs to drink milk?
Of course not.
I mean, because that's the next logical extension of this. If the woman has to use her body to sustain the child's life during a pregnancy, then, what's to stop, some jerk from legislating the requirement that the woman breastfeed?
But here's the thing, Jen, and this is a very interesting point that you actually turned me on to, which was the idea that prior to the birth, there's no mother-child relationship.
Right.
There may be emotionally, for some people, that relationship, but legally, that does not exist until that child is born. You don't have maternal rights and maternal obligations as a pregnant woman because you are not the mother.
Right. And the law has typically recognized this in that if, let's say, somebody commits an armed robbery and in the course of the robbery, they injure a pregnant woman, and, she subsequently dies, they typically get charged only with one murder. They don't get charged with, a double homicide because, you don't have, a separate child yet.
That's changing, though.
Right,
I know,
but it still doesn't endow her with the rights and obligations of maternity. Even if you did treat it as a human being that was murdered, it doesn't make her legally maternally obligated and endowed with rights over the unborn. She does not have that. She is not named as the mother until it's born. Legally, that child has no mother or father until the birth.
Right.
Well, one thing that
part of this came about as a result of the fact that you can't give up custody of an unborn child. So you can't there are no parental rights until the child is born.
Those rights are not yours to give to somebody else.
Right. And after the birth, only after the birth can you relinquish your parental rights.
That's when you have them.
Exactly.
Okay, this is something that anti-choicers have brought up to me. And since we're going to say that parental rights or responsibilities might attach at birth, if a pregnant woman goes to a deserted island and subsequently gives birth and decides not to breastfeed and the baby dies because she didn't want to use her body to sustain another, should she be charged?
Yeah, you have when you birth that child, you then are endowed with parental rights and obligations, and you are the caregiver of that child is your ward.
Yeah,
and you would be tasked with feeding it and just like general standard baseline survival care, just like I would if my husband was had a stroke and I was given the legal obligation of caring for him. I couldn't starve him to death in the bedroom because I don't want to use my body to get up and bring him food. So, yeah, I definitely would be, I would be endowed with obligations toward a person that I accept legal responsibility for. And when you carry the birth to term and you birth the child, you have accepted legal responsibility for that baby, which is why many states have abandonment laws. You can legally leave your kid in certain circumstances where it's safe, but if you drop your kid off on a doorstep, you're going to face charges. Because you have obligations legally the moment that child is born. You're the mother and you have an obligation legally. And you know that when you birthed it. So it's the same as me taking on, signing all the paperwork to be my husband's caregiver and saying, yes, I'll be his legal guardian, his legal caregiver, and he will be my ward as a person with a stroke. And I can't put him in a room and starve him to death. You can relinquish those rights. I can say I don't want to take care of him anymore, and I'm willing to give that up to state care or whatever it is I need to do. And somebody with a baby can do that as well. They can say, well, I'd like to give up these rights. And like what Jen has, talked to me about a little bit is the idea that whether you're the mother or the father and you want to give up those rights, you have to get the consent of the other parent based on how our laws are structured currently. But the fact is, as long as both parents are consenting, they're not obligated to that child either, as long as they're willing to sign over consent to the state or to some other party that will take responsibility.
Well, okay, but we just said that you don't have to give a drop of blood.
You don't.
Right.
But you would have to give a drop of milk if there was nothing else available.
You can't starve the child. That's a baseline standard of care.
Yeah, and I think that the difference here is that, you have to, you have to do what's reasonable under the circumstances to properly care for the child.
Right. I couldn't starve my husband to death in the next room, but if he needed a kidney and I was an appropriate donor, I could say, no, I'm not going to do that, and I've done nothing wrong. I don't have to give up. There's like a certain baseline of care when a person can survive as an autonomous physical being by simply eating and breathing and, kind of doing these digestive, baseline existence things. We consider that, okay, you're alive. Your brain is functioning, your body is functioning, and you need some help getting food and stuff. But as long as you're getting this nourishment, as long as you're getting this air, I'm not suffocating you, denying you air, baseline survival needs are met, then you are okay to survive. And I can't stop you from surviving by denying you food, denying you water, denying you air.
Well, anti-choicers would say that then pregnancy is basic care. It is not an extraordinary.
You are not obligated to the infant until it's born.
Yeah.
You are not the caregiver. There is no legal obligation. You are not the mother. You are a person with another person utilizing your body without your consent, and they're using all your organs. They're not just breathing and eating. If my husband wasn't denied food, air, water, he would survive, right? If someone else gave it to him and I didn't, he would survive. Yeah. He has a physical capacity. He's physically autonomous. He may not be able to get to the kitchen and get the food, but as long as he has food, air, water, he survives. His body functions to autonomously. He's not on life support. Now, my child that is unborn, or the child that is unborn, is not an autonomous being. It cannot survive. The body will not support it in any kind of a dream of autonomy. It doesn't have a fully functioning body. It has a non-functioning body. It would be like if my husband's kidneys gave out. I'm not obligated to give him a kidney. But I can't deny him the normal stuff that any human being would require to survive. If somebody locked me in a room and kept food for me, I'd die too. But that doesn't mean I'm not an autonomous existing thing. The child cannot exist autonomously. It will die even with food, air, water, as long as it doesn't have somebody else's body to utilize their organs and use as a surrogate body. You can't use my body as a surrogate body, but that doesn't mean I can starve you. I can deny you water. I can deny you air. There's a line there. That is my body.
Okay. Well, that's clearing it up, I suppose. This is a really weird thing, and it's all theoretical. This would never happen. My response has always been, whenever this comes up, which is usually late into the argument, is that if this ever happened, then the woman has the right to choose herself, and breastfeeding is extremely calorie intensive, so it would reduce her survival if she breastfed.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about a situation where somebody's having to weigh their capacity to survive, I mean, yes, now you're getting into a situation, like you said, that's a hypothetical where what if I might risk my own survival in bringing you food? Would I have to bring my husband? Like let's say my husband's incapacitated in the bedroom and the house catches fire and I can't get into the bedroom and I'm thinking it's unsafe for me to try to get to him. Might be able to get him to the house if I can get to him. I might be able to get him out of the house safely, but I don't know if I can get to him without risking my life. Do I need to run through the flames to try and save him? I mean, that's my decision. I get to decide whether or not I'm willing to risk my own life to save him. That's another situation. I have an obligation to him. He's my ward and he can't walk and he's in the other room and I know he needs help. But whether or not I'm willing to run through flames to try to save his life is my decision. And I won't be tried for murder if I say, look, I couldn't get through. I decided I might die if I tried.
Yeah, which is actually a similar situation that a pregnant woman would be in if she discovered that she had developed some kind of complication during the pregnancy, and now the pregnancy is putting her life at risk. It's her decision as to whether she continues the pregnancy and, is willing to risk her life to have the child. and it's wrong for anyone else to impose that, basically make that decision for her and impose an obligation
if somebody
on her.
is dependent on you, legally dependent on you for food, and you aren't giving them that food, and you can, like it's not risking your life. I mean, and you just don't. You just starved someone to death.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think there's a slight. I mean, there's a difference between food and, I think, milk from your body. I think there's a little bit of.
I guess what I'm thinking is, if you have a bottle to feed your baby, then you're not required to breastfeed. But if you don't, and you just say, I don't want to breastfeed, but I'm not going to feed it anything else, you're starving your child. You're making a decision to starve your baby to death, and that's not okay.
Well, yeah. Well, in this world where there's, transferability of care, but the anti-choice argument is there is no if there is no transferability of care, do you have an obligation to use your body?
Not if you are not obligated as, number one, you're not obligated as a parent. So the parental rights argument is out the window. There is no parental obligation before the birth of the child. This is strictly about, can one human being use another human being's body without their consent? And the answer to that is no. There is no legal obligation on the part of this woman. She is not a legally obligated person with maternal rights and obligations.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, this is something that anti-choicers bring up sometimes when I talk about my opposition to circumcision. It's this, well, why are you so concerned about the pain that a little boy might experience during a neonatal or an infant circumcision, but you're pro-choice, and you wouldn't be concerned if the mother decided to abort him. And the difference is that in the case of an infant, you have an infant who is born. He actually has rights as a human being because he was born. And that is the bright line that separates, not only when the child is considered a child and has rights, but also when the parents have obligations to the child.
It gets really weird at the point of when you get into this personhood thing. It gets really strange because
and I think this is one of the real dangers of these personhood amendments. Declaring that a fetus is a person under the law.
Well, the point is though, I'm willing to deal with the idea that you have a point in the pregnancy where the child is autonomous. There is a point where the child simply is unable to remove itself. And yet it could survive if it were separated. And at that point, I do understand, I think, I'm willing to discuss it, but I think at that point there is a legal validity to the idea that this thing can be removed and it doesn't have to be killed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm cool with that. It's like, okay, that to me is arguable. It's like, okay, if you want to say that at this point in the pregnancy, we know that this thing can survive without the mother. So if you want to remove it from the mother and it can survive, there's no need to kill it. We can remove it. She can sign over rights to the state. She doesn't have to worry about it. If she wants to abort at that late stage, we should be able to do. It seems like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. So I don't know what the complications would be, but it seems like at a point where it's late enough in the pregnancy, if she's coming forward, she wants that abortion, and we have the determination medically that it's at a stage where it is autonomous and therefore deserves the rights of personhood, it should be separable, and then it should be able to live autonomously. I don't have any problem with that. In theory.
Okay, I've got a hypothetical then. A woman is pregnant, doesn't want to be, there's nobody else around. She induces her own labor, and the preterm infant comes out, and she just leaves it out in the forest because there's no one to transfer care to.
Okay, under U.S. law, she's abandoned her child, and she is legally obligated, and she will face charges.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Once she births that live baby, that's hers, and she is mom. And she is legally obligated. That is U.S. law.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I don't even see that one as difficult. Am I missing like a key point or something is what I'm wondering.
Well, my fear is that, anti-choicers, first of all, with the woman breastfeeding on an island, we've laid down this line. You don't have to use your body to support anyone else. And
and look at the response. Wait a minute, but the response, look at what it is. It's a hypothetical. Do you see the stretch already? If the only response to something is a hypothetical, you've already lost. Let's look at reality. The reality is you can feed your baby without using your body, and you can give up rights to other people. You are not on an island somewhere making decisions about survival. You're having the baby. You have an opportunity to give it up for adoption, sign it over to other parents, hand it over to a freaking fire station where you can just drop it off, no questions asked, in almost every state. You have no obligation to this child as soon as you're willing to hand over the rights. We made it that easy to hand over those rights. And if you want to keep it and you don't want to breastfeed, guess what? There's a slew of products out there for you to feed without breastfeeding. And you don't have to use your body if you don't want to. But there's a big difference between starving your kid to death and saying you can't use my kidneys. And anybody that doesn't understand that, I don't know what else to tell them other than my husband in the other room who's had a stroke, who is my ward. I can't not bring him food as long as I can maintain guardianship of him, but I can refuse to let him use my kidneys. I don't know why that's hard. Some people have such a hard time with that, but I don't know why it's hard, because in every other situation, we seem to understand it so clearly. And yet when it comes to a pregnant woman, suddenly it's like everybody loses their mind.
Well, yeah. And one of the main things about everybody losing their mind about pregnant women is they are infected with the naturalistic fallacy. Let me read a little more from this blog. There's a pro-choice person on Facebook who likes to monitor pro-life news sites and share her findings on her status updates alongside comments of criticism and or ridicule. Wonder who that is. And one of the latest links she shared, which, by the way, I'm not sure this was late, it was April.
Beth, I think you got a woman crush. I think this girl has a woman crush.
Oh, I don't know.
You got a fan.
I read a Facebook comment by an abortion supporter concerning this article that stated fetal development doesn't give fetuses rights no fully developed person has. Translation, fetal development doesn't give fetuses the right to use women's bodies. Right. Firstly, fetal development, which evidences that the fetus is a human being, does give fetuses the moral right to life, which is in fact a right that fully developed persons also have.
Because they can live without using other people's bodies, correct?
Right.
I mean, if she wants to use this, if she's going to a moral argument, now she's moved it to the ground of her judgment. This is no longer a legal argument. This is now an argument of what she feels is correct, personally.
Okay, well, listen to this. Secondly, a fully developed person, i.e. an adult, is not naturally ordered to receiving nurture inside a woman's womb. An adult is not by natural design a presence within and dependent upon a woman's womb.
Right, and that is too bad for the fetus. That's the thing that sucks about being a fetus, is that you are reliant on someone's consent to use their body, because that's how nature has made gestation work.
An adult is not by natural design. Oh, I already read that. And finally, I could turn the aforementioned abortion defender's logic right around on her. It's that poorly thought out. Full development of a person doesn't give him or her a right to life no fetuses have. What? Indeed, an adult does not possess the moral right to live inside a woman's womb, which is perceivable by the fact that it is not even physically possible for an adult to do so.
Wait a minute. There's a confusion here between right and capacity. An adult human doesn't have the capacity to survive inside a woman's uterus. It doesn't, or womb or whatever. It doesn't. It's not about a moral right. A fetus has a capacity to do that, and a grown human does not have a capacity to do that. This is not about a moral right. This is about capacity. When you have a fetus with a capacity to do that, it doesn't mean just because you have the capacity to live inside another person's body that you have a right to do it without their consent. You don't. You have to, the other person, at what point does the person whose body's being used get asked, is this okay? Like, it's almost like that you have to discount that entirely, that this is another human being involved and that there is an imposition of rights here. And it's like, okay, wait a second. If my survival depends on imposing on somebody else's rights, you have a question then about the rights that prevail. And in every other situation where bodily autonomy is weighed against right to survive, the right to survive loses. Why does it win in the situation where it's a pregnant woman? Why should we reverse that completely in one situation where in every other situation where I will die without using someone else's body, I can't use it without their consent? It makes no sense.
Yeah. And so, let's see. Where was I? If there is anything irrelevant to a serious discussion about abortion, it is the mention of a non-occurrence determined by physical impossibility as a grounds for denying pregnancy, a biologically possible, actual, natural, essential to humanity, ordinary, and universal occurrence, the protection of law.
Protecting pregnancy by law? I don't understand. It is protected by law. No one can come and force you to abort.
Yeah, why is pregnancy not protected?
If I come into your house and I end your pregnancy against your will, believe me, the law will be all over my ass.
Oh, yeah.
So your pregnancy is protected, 100%.
Yes, well, she's meaning the fetus's right to cause you to be pregnant and to stay pregnant is what she's talking about. Actually, there was another anti-choice site. I'm trying to find it, but I pretty much know what they said.
There are two people. While you're looking, let me just say, there are two people involved here. You cannot discount the woman. You cannot discount her. You can't just say, well, she doesn't need to consent to this agreement here.
She consented when she had sex.
No, you can't go there. You cannot go there because
but that's the underlying issue.
But that's not. That's like we've talked about this before. Saying that a person who has sex consents to be pregnant is like saying a person who drives their car consents to die on the side of the road. Yeah. No, that's not correct.
Yeah, but that's really the underlying issue behind these arguments is that she consented to sex, therefore she consented to whatever may have happened as a result of that.
No, you have a right to mitigate your risks, whether you mitigate them, before, after, during, whatever you want to do. Mitigating risk is something that we all do every day in every situation. There's nothing weird about it. It's the responsible thing to do. And the other thing is that, I know that she doesn't have a parental obligation toward the unborn, but if we're going to say that you have sex and therefore you are, obligated with the welfare, and right to life of this child, we have to start imposing compulsory bodily use of the parents to children who are born.
Okay,
Why would a child that is, a person and existent because you created it, just because it comes out of your womb, mean that you're not obligated to its life anymore in the same capacity?
Well, I find it interesting that most of these anti-choicers, they fall back on these religious arguments. And it's interesting that this one is also invoking this naturalistic fallacy because, one of the interesting facts about humanity is that throughout most of human evolution, the primary means of population control has been some form of infanticide to limit the number of children that are, in hunter-gatherer groups, throughout most of human history, they have used infanticide and have had abortifacients available. This is how human populations were kept under control, because if you had unrestricted reproduction, you'd very soon produce more children than the group could support.
Okay, I found this. This is just, you're going to want to Hulk smash when you hear this. This is at unmaskingchoice.ca. Someone gave this person the kidney uterus analogy. Once one looks at the function of the kidneys in the uterus, it is quite clear why the professor's analogy does not have merit. The kidneys exist for the health and proper functioning of the body in which they reside. In other words, kidneys exist in a body for that body. In contrast, the uterus exists in one body to be around and for another body. The fact that a woman can live without her uterus but a fetus cannot shows that the uterus exists for the unborn child rather than for the mother. The unborn, as members of the human family, then, must not be denied the environment that regularly waits in great expectation for them.
No, basically the summary of that is you are a human incubator.
Yes.
You were put on this earth to incubate. That's what this is about.
And a little bit of hysteria, too, that your uterus craves the babies.
Yeah. Their definition of a woman is...
I'm childless by choice, and let me just say that, I don't feel like I should go to jail for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, apparently their definition of a woman is the life support system for the uterus.
Yes. Well, this is not a secular site. This is going to be particularly religious, but the fact that the uterus, an organ created to nurture the unborn, belongs to the woman tells us something very important and beautiful about the nature and purpose of women.
Wait, stop right there for a moment. Let me just repeat something you just said. The uterus belongs to the woman.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Tells us something very important and beautiful about the nature and purpose of women, that they are to be mothers, whether in physical or spiritual form. A pregnant woman becomes a tabernacle enveloping a person made in the image of the divine. Far from being viewed as an injustice, as an intrusion on one's bodily rights, it should be viewed as a fulfillment of one's purpose.
Okay, wait. Before you even go on, they've already gone over the rainbow of a legal discussion.
True.
I mean, they are like they've gone out to where the monsters are in the sea and over the edge of the earth.
Yes.
And they are now into their religion, which has no authority in legislation.
However, the secular anti-choicers have used Jen Roth of, I forgot what her organization is, but she's affiliated with one of the atheist anti-choice things, gave a talk once. She had a debate. She's been on pro-life podcast. Her argument is nothing but a steaming, heaping pile of naturalistic fallacy. And she might say that the uterus evolved to carry fetuses instead of, it was created to carry the divine image, but that is the same shit repackaged.
I guess my question would be then, can I deny it use of my heart? Can I deny it use of my lungs? Can I deny it use of my kidneys? Can it have the womb? Can we remove the womb and just leave the fetus in that and then deny it the use of these other organs which are not for the fetus? And will that satisfy them? Will that placate them? I don't think so.
No.
Yeah,
No.
So they do want it to use all these other, quote, organs that aren't put in my body for the fetus, right? I mean, the idea is it's going to use my entire body. And it's going to use it without my consent. This other person is going to use my body and I don't get asked, and you might as well just put me into prostitution slavery at that point. If people can use my body and then not, it's like you could say that my vagina was put here for men to fuck me, right? I mean, that's what it's for. It's for sex, right? It's for a penis. So what's if you like put me into a brothel and put me into, human slavery, what is the difference? Men are screwing me, but that's what my vagina is for, right? I'm allowed to say vagina, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the point. It's like, this is what it is for, screwing, isn't it? And so, you put those penises in there, and then, Tracie, what are you bitching about? So these men want to use your body. That's what your body's for. That's what your vagina's for. It's for a penis, right?
Oh, that's so good. That is such a good response.
Yeah.
So let these men use it and quit bitching. Let these other people use it. They're supposed to use it. That's what that part of your body's for. It's for a man's penis.
Well, and not only that, but according to some conservative Catholic groups, it's the only appropriate place for a man to ejaculate.
Yes. That's
inside a
Catholics.
vagina. So
my gay male friends would have some comments about that, but they found other places that work just as well.
Yes.
yeah.
Maybe they would say better. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know
if they're gay, they definitely would. Okay, this is another argument about ordinary versus extraordinary. The role of woman as mother means that she, like the father, has a responsibility to her offspring that she does not have to strangers. And while that responsibility does not obligate her to do extraordinary things, such as taking trips to Disneyland or donating kidneys, it does obligate her to do ordinary things such as feeding, clothing, and sheltering her offspring. To do otherwise would be parental neglect. And so,
we're talking about a born child, which I assume we
Yes.
are because we're talking about clothing it. I don't think you're clothing your fetus. I mean, that would be a trick. So I assume we're talking about a child that has been born that you now have the parental obligation toward, that you can sign away to someone else if you don't want it.
well, they are conflating this. And so, maintaining pregnancy is simply doing for the unborn what parents must do for the born.
Except you're not a parent.
Providing the shelter and nourishment a child needs. It is what is required in the normal course of the reproduction of our species.
No.
Except it's not legally required. And until the child is born, you don't have offspring.
Right, you're not allowed to hand that obligation off. And so what's happening is you're being obligated by natural reality. I agree, this is a natural reality, but it is unfortunate for the fetus because this natural reality puts you into a situation where you are at odds with another person's bodily autonomy. And that, my right to life, loses against bodily autonomy in every other situation. And so when we get to this situation and the question comes up, oh, we've got a situation here where we've got a fetus whose, right to life is coming into conflict with someone's bodily autonomy, what do? My response is we look at all these other situations where someone's physical autonomy is coming into conflict with someone's right to life, and we see that every time right to life loses. And so it's unfortunate for the fetus because when those two rights come into conflict, right to life loses every time. You never, ever, ever can use another person's body without their consent to ensure your survival. Never.
Yes.
And this situation is a situation where those rights are in conflict one more time, and the solution, in my mind, needs to be exactly the same.
Yeah. And anti-choicers just refuse to understand it. I think they can get it. One of the things, I had a very long exchange on the Secular Pro-Life page on Facebook last night with somebody who could not reconcile the fact that I didn't care if he thought I was immoral or mean or
that argument is such a waste of time, and it is so annoying because the people that make it do not understand that they are doing nothing but wasting your time. And that annoys the hell out of me because when someone wastes your time, I'm just going to put it out really simply. My life is a timeline. There's a start where I was born and there's an end where I will die. And in between is time. And when you waste my freaking time, that is so disrespectful. And if I'm wasting your time, you do me the biggest favor in the world to say, you know what, I'm not interested, don't waste my time, so that I will stop wasting your time because I don't want to disrespect you in that way by being a waste of your life. And when someone comes to me and starts to make this moralistic argument and they start saying like, well, I think it's immoral, but I'm pro-choice, but I think it's immoral and I want to talk to you about it. My response is, I don't give a shit. This is the alcohol talking, but I mean, the sentiment is mine with sobriety behind it, which is when you waste my time in that way, it is so disrespectful that, metaphorically, I would like to bitch slap you. Because I don't care. If you are pro-life, I don't need to argue with you. Give a shit if you think it's wrong in your mind personally. And you know what? If you think it's wrong, but you think it's a decision that every person should be able to make for themselves, what the hell is the benefit of convincing me to agree with you? Because then we both think it's immoral, but we both support pro-life still. So what was that about?
Yeah.
What the hell is the net benefit to that? It's a waste of time.
Yeah, exactly. I only want to talk to people that think it should be illegal.
Yeah, I don't care. If you're pro-choice, I don't have any argument with you. If you're pro-choice and you think it's immoral, guess what? You're free to think it's immoral. And I don't care, and I'm not condemning you. And I could give a crap. I know a lot of women, in fact, who in a million years would never abort. If it came to a decision where their doctor was saying, you will die if you try to have this baby, they would still try to have the baby. Because in their head, they would never be able to kill their own, unborn child. That's just the type of person they are. They just think it would be so wrong to risk that child in any way, and they would rather die than risk their child's life. And in my head, I'm thinking, that's their decision. I don't think they're horrible people because that's their morality. I don't make some kind of judgment on them and say, oh, they're an idiot or they're completely wrong. That's just their choice. That's the beauty of choice, is I can look at that and I can say, well, that's your decision.
Well, and the beauty of the pro-choice position is that even if they are risking their own life to have a child, pro-choice gives them that option.
Sure.
The government can't come in and say, oh, no, we can't allow you to risk your own life for this. You must abort.
Yeah, and if the government did that, I would be the first one to stand up and say, whoa, no,
Yeah,
you don't
absolutely.
tell her. She decides what she's willing to risk here. This is her.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's the reason.
She may think that it's immoral when someone has an abortion. She may be completely unhappy about it, completely bothered by it every single night of her life. And that's fine. I'm not condemning her for that. I don't care. She understands that ultimately her morality does not make the law for everybody else in this country.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that's why pro-choice is actually pro-choice and not pro-abortion, if you want to use pro-abortion to mean everybody should just have abortions all the fucking time. And anti-choice is actually anti-choice.
Yeah, absolutely. It is about whether or not you think that decision rests with the individual who is risking the pregnancy.
Yeah.
And it is a risk. I mean, when you go forward with a pregnancy, lots of things can happen. And lots of things can happen that weren't foreseen early in the pregnancy.
Oh, this was one of my huge things. There is a such thing as a low-risk pregnancy and a high-risk pregnancy. There is no such thing as a no-risk pregnancy.
Yeah,
the lowest risk woman could start hemorrhaging immediately after birth. No risk factors, no nothing. Bleed out.
Yeah.
That can happen.
Yeah, the government doesn't tell you that you have to risk a pregnancy. They don't tell you that. They don't get to tell you that you have to run that risk.
Yeah, all the anti-choicers I'm talking to are saying, oh, not all pregnancies have those risks. No, not all pregnancies have the same risk, but they all have risks. You can't be compelled to take those risks, which actually are very high. Maternal mortality, I mean, it's rarer than it used to be.
Medical risk has to come with consent.
Yes.
I mean, and that's my whole point, is you cannot simply impose on this person and say that their consent is irrelevant. This is bullshit. You're asking someone to give up, almost a year of their life here devoted to something, and you're saying that we don't even need to ask them if that's acceptable. And it's like, are you shitting me? You really believe this? Because this is batshit crazy.
Yeah, everyone thinks pregnancy is so normal and natural, and in certain ways it is, but we would never punish someone with the things that happen during pregnancy. That would be considered cruel and unusual punishment if it happened in any other context. And the only thing the woman has done has had sex, maybe irresponsibly, maybe even responsibly. Maybe the birth control just failed. But if we were putting that on anyone else for almost anything they had
No,
done.
You're right. I mean, we put Ted Bundy to death in Florida, and we wouldn't have borrowed an organ from him.
Yes,
I mean,
or even
it's ironic.
if we had spent 9 months, giving him Ipecac to make him throw up and putting weight down on him and putting him through contractions and stuff, that would have been considered cruel and unusual punishment.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, nobody would agree to that. And you couldn't. And you couldn't ask him to donate even blood. And it's funny because I think people have told me that, and I haven't looked into this, so I guess it could be false, but I have had a few people tell me that in China, I guess, they have a thing where there are prisoners that they make do body donations or something.
I've heard, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, that to me should be appalling. I mean, when you hear a government doing that to people, even if, let's say that it's not true, but it's like just the concept of it should be completely freakish and appalling. The idea that the government can compel you to use your body to sustain another person's existence who can't survive autonomously. I mean, to me, the idea of donating your body or donating a body part or whatever you want to donate about your body or whatever, that it has to do with another person's existence. If you want to do that, bravo. You are a real humanitarian. And I applaud you. It's a wonderful thing that you're willing to donate your body to somebody else's existence. And like I've done blood donations before. And so, it's like very nice, whatever. I would never, ever, ever support government compelled blood donation. That's insane. That is a scary, scary world. I don't even know what to say. If you think that the government should be allowed to compel the citizens to donate blood and organs and tissue and whatever, I don't want to live in your world.
Yeah, and
Yep.
they never admit this because we all know it's all about sex and women and all that sort of stuff. So
Well, and yeah, I mean, a significant portion of it is just anti-sex, but a big chunk of it is this, and even the secular pro-life groups borrow from the religious groups in that some of the language is similar. It's that you're punished for having sex outside of the approved outlets, and there's this overwhelming desire to control not only women's sexuality, but women's fertility. And that's just frightening to me.
well, I think there is a deep-seated fear in a lot of people that if women aren't somehow forced into having babies, that they won't.
Yeah, never mind the fact that when you give control of, if you give women control of their own fertility, then what you see are better outcomes for the women themselves, for the children they have. So, instead of having, 6 children, maybe they have 2, but the 2 do better.
Right. They have more resources, more access to stuff.
And in the countries where women have control of their fertility, men do better as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's nationwide. There's a guy named Hans Rosling who has a TED Talk that makes a really compelling case for the fact that the number of children in the world has peaked. It's 2 billion. That's it. And it's because the birth rates are declining precipitously as women get control of their own reproductive lives. And so basically, the world population will still continue to increase because people are living longer, and basically you've got, the number of people that are currently on the planet will continue to age and fill in the gaps, basically. So we're going to reach about 9 billion people on the planet, but we probably have reached peak child. And it's because women have control or are getting more control throughout the world. And
9 billion scares the crap out of me.
yeah, it is a frightening number.
I mean, I don't know if that's irrational of me, you know, based on just like the size of the planet. I have no idea. It just sounds like such a huge number.
Yeah. I mean, the scary thing is that
I just think, do we need that many people?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not, you know, and please don't, you know, I'm not advocating like genocide or something crazy. I'm just saying, can we, you know, pull back on the breeding, because we're not in danger of extinction here. We're doing good.
Exactly.
So we can hang back a little bit and, you know, give some of the planet over to some other stuff. It doesn't have to all be devoted to subdivisions.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, when you do give women the ability to control their fertility, they take it. You do not have to have one-child policies like in China. If you give women education and birth control, they take it and run with it. It has been shown time after time in many countries, in developing countries right now they're doing it, and birth rates are just dropping.
And that should make people happy, because there's lots and lots of people. I mean, if you look at population estimates from just like the 1960s and look at today, it's astronomically crazy. Like the exponential growth rate of the human population is obscene. And, you know, maybe, I'm not saying that we, you know, I'm not talking about like we can't sustain it, or I don't know. I have no clue. I mean, maybe it's completely sustainable. That's a different question than whether or not it's necessary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, we can sustain it, but my Lord, 9 billion? That's almost an infestation. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, that's crazy. And we can just chill out on the kids here for a while. And I tell you what, if everybody that could find it in themselves to chill out did chill out, there are plenty of people that just simply want kids who will keep it going. There's lots of those. And believe me, we're not going extinct just because, you know, some of the population says, well, you know what, maybe some of those 100,000 children that are in hard to adopt situations at Child Protective Services would be welcome in my home instead of me breeding. Maybe that's an option for some people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd be a little careful there. There's a lot of issues with kids in foster care and adoption, and how adoption isn't as easy as people make it out to be. But yeah, the sentiment, yeah.
I do know some people that have adopted through CPS, and you know, they've gone through the struggle and come out and they're happy. And I'm sure there's horror stories too. But I'm just saying, there's kids who are wanting homes, and there's, you know, so it's almost like breeding dogs when there's, you know, dogs at the shelter. Being put down. I don't know. Now, a lot of these kids that are in CPS end up homeless because they age out of the system and they have no support system. That's my plug for CPS and adoption.
Okay. Well, is there anything else anybody wanted to talk about? I have maybe a couple little short things.
I think I've ranted enough. I probably ranted way too much. I'll probably generate more email than I'm not even on email anymore, so I don't even know. I'll get crap, I'm sure.
Well, I just want one of whatever drinks you're having. So
yeah,
it's not that big of it. What is it? What is it I've got here? It's Cabernet Sauvignon. Very simple.
Oh.
No.
Nothing wild. I'm not like down in Scotch or. I don't need to. It doesn't take much to set me off. I'm like a firecracker.
So, Ophelia Benson, everybody knows there's been this whole thing with Tam and how Tam has not been very responsive. Tam and DJ Grothy have not been very responsive to complaints about harassment. So Ophelia Benson was scheduled to talk at TAM, and she's a feminist blogger, feminist atheist blogger at Butterflies and Wheels. She got a threat. And, yeah, she got a threat concerning TAM. Talked to the organizers. She decided not to go. And said that the organizers did not seem overly concerned or responsive to the threat she got.
Well, because she's just being a hypersensitive bitch.
Did she publish it?
She hadn't.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not being judgmental because sometimes, believe me, having been the recipient of some weirdness, I understand the idea that you may not want to like give a lot of publicity to a crazy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, you can't help but be curious, you know what I mean? And that's just like a natural curiosity of like, well, what is, you know, to help you judge, I suppose, from an external standpoint. But I don't, I'm not going to make too much of a harsh judgment for somebody who decides that they may not want to give publicity to a nut that's written to them and threaten them. Because believe me, if you get that, sometimes you have to stop and think about whether or not you want to. Sometimes publishing that can fan that flame. And so I just want people to know that when you are the recipient of this kind of crazy, the idea of exposing it is something you have to really weigh.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as of last night, she had not published that. So, but yeah, she didn't say very much about it at all. But it just illustrates. And there was actually another thing on Greta's blog. I can't, we don't have time to go into a whole big discussion, but apparently there was a man at the last TAM harassing women and who was possibly taking upskirt photos. He was holding a camera way down low on a stick, and
okay, that right there is like, I mean, that should. What is your camera on a stick for, dude?
Well, and it's one of these little telescoping. It's not really a tripod. It's just this little telescoping rod that you mount the camera on.
But come on, it's like, did you order this out of the back of a comic book? Are you 12 years old? Like, what is the deal here?
well,
Yeah, there's actually an online site, and supposedly it's so that you can take pictures of yourself without having somebody else say, "Oh, can you take a picture of me with Richard Dawkins or whatever?" You know. So that's supposedly what he was using it for. But you know what?
So it's like your arm. It's like the arm thing. Like you hold it out.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, when you've been, when people have complained about you taking upskirt photos previously at a TAM, or you've been accused of misbehavior before, and then you're walking around with a camera on a stick at ankle level pointed up, you're going to be it's reasonable to assume that you might be taking upskirt photos.
Yeah, and the person who, one of the people who, this was actually reported. This was reported formally. Both the harassment that had been experienced as well as the possibility of upskirt photos by a woman and a person named Lee. Lee identifies as trans, so doesn't use, gendered pronouns. This was actually on Greta's blog. But the thing is, DJ Grothy publicly said that there had been no reports of harassment at TAMS.
Yeah, I did see that.
But yet this report is coming out that there was a formal written report at the previous one. Maybe he didn't think that had actually been reported. Maybe he has some weird standard of what reporting actually means, or maybe he just forgot. But, it doesn't make me comfortable. I don't much care for TAM because of the other skeptic atheist dichotomy thing. But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but this is a meeting that specifically exempts theists' beliefs from criticism, and they want to call themselves skeptics. And
I want to address something that has come up like a lot. It's something that comes up often, and I think it needs to be addressed. And it's this idea of benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
There's always somebody that's just like, well, maybe, like you're saying, maybe the camera on the stick is long-arming it, and then maybe that's all he was doing, and he might have just been dragging it around because, he didn't want to pick it up. And, there's always a person that's willing to defend this and to look for the benefit of the doubt. And that's kind. It's very kind to look for the benefit of the doubt. But let me just throw this out there. Let's say I'm at home and I have a toddler. It's like 3 years old. And a stranger comes to my door and says, hey, I will take your toddler out to the park this afternoon, and you can have the afternoon free. I'll bring him back at 5. Do I give him my toddler?
Oh, hell no.
Well, why not? I mean, am I going to just assume the guy's like a child molester or something? I mean, come on. I got to give the guy the benefit of the doubt.
No, you don't.
Oh, but I mean, what kind of freak am I to just assume all the worst in people?
A smart one?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, look at this. I'm just being a bitch, right? I'm just like thinking the worst about this person at my door. I mean, they might be a very nice person that just loves children.
Yeah, you're going to be the bitch whose kid
this is the
did not.
stupidity of the benefit of the doubt argument. There's a point where, there's a reasonable benefit of the doubt, and there's this other point where it's just like, okay, come on. It's like, whatever.
Yeah, you're going to be the bitch
Just
whose
stop.
kid did not get kidnapped and killed or whatever.
We all, when it comes to a stranger behaving weirdly and doing something that can be construed as a problem, like asking you to babysit your kid for the afternoon, and they'll take them away and you can have your afternoon free. How cool is that? Well, I don't know you, and no, you're not taking my kid. And yes, I do not know whether or not you mean harm or you're a nice person just looking for babysitting money and opportunities. I don't know that, but I'm not risking my kid.
Yeah.
To like make nice with you.
Yeah.
You use your brain and use a little discretion.
Yeah.
And I understand the benefit of the doubt, and I like people, and I want to think the best about people, but at the same time, come on, be reasonable.
Yeah, there's skepticism, and then there's just being an idiot. I mean, one of the things, I also had another post on my Facebook, which I guess this whole podcast is just to go look at my Facebook podcast. But
I can't wait to get off this podcast so I can go look at your Facebook and see what I've been missing.
But there was another link today. A skeptical or atheist blogger had his Jeep stolen and wrote a blog post about how I've gotten nothing but sympathy and support, and no one questioned whether my Jeep was gone. No one questioned why there was camping gear in it. No one questioned all this stuff. And, obviously meaning to, if I had said I had been raped, I would have been questioned. I would have been interrogated.
Yeah, well, and this gets back to another post by Amanda Marcotte, who pointed out that she has never known of any rape victim who was not basically vilified in some manner after reporting that she was assaulted.
Oh,
it inevitably happens that instead of people believing her or him and offering support and asking what can we do, stuff like that, you get people saying, well, what were you wearing, or why were you walking that way at night, or what did you expect when you got so drunk?
Yeah, did you know him? Did you invite him in your house?
Yeah. Have you ever had sex with him before? Yeah.
Well, it's like you were talking about, Jen, with one time we were discussing that whole, the event, which was never named. And and I remember you saying, if everybody who was saying, oh, it's only coffee, what if she would have gone to the room and been sexually assaulted? How many people would then be responding and saying, what the fuck does she think when someone invites her to their room for 4 a.m. for coffee?
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, those very same people who were saying it was only coffee, there is no doubt in my mind they would be the first in line to condemn her by saying, oh, what did she expect? She didn't really think coffee meant coffee.
And you know what? It's just coffee, and you know what else? He just wants to take your kid to the playground. Yeah. And he's just a nice guy in the neighborhood who loves kids. Yeah. So give him a chance. You don't know him, but whatever. You don't want to think the worst about people. So hand over your 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see you do it. Let me see you live this crap that you are saying everybody else needs to do.
Yeah. Yep. And so, by the way, earlier when I mentioned, Ophelia Benson was just being, an oversensitive bitch, that was obviously sarcasm, in case anybody missed that. because that's typically the reaction we get from people. You know, if you mention something like this, even if it's mildly offensive behavior, you know, oh, you're just being, you know, a hypersensitive cunt.
I'm going to get a T-shirt that says that. I said that for, I think the conferences. I think I said something that was like going to say something like that, oversensitive cunt. And I want to get a T-shirt that says that so that people know if I decide to, you know, I'm not a highly social person. If I go to one of these conferences, I want to get a T-shirt that says oversensitive cunt so that everybody knows that I am the oversensitive cunt and you want to stay away from me. Don't come up to me. You know, if you are the person that hates an oversensitive cunt, then you know to just keep the distance because that's me.
Well, and I think that maybe that should be the official T-shirt for people that are like the security people for the conference, because you know we have the ACA has a draft anti-harassment policy, and you know we're putting in their information. There's going to be an event one, and you know the blanket policy, and then the event one it will be you know. The designated people to report incidents to. So maybe the designated people should wear the oversensitive cunt T-shirt so that people can.
You know what I also thought of, and you guys tell me if you think this is a bad idea, because I've been thinking about it, and I'm just like, it seems like a good idea to me. But sometimes when something's in your own head, it seems good until other people hear it. I was thinking, you know, they have all those colored bracelets for all these different causes. Like the blood bank has the red one, and Lance Armstrong has a yellow one, and like you've got all the, you know, pet people that like, you know, the animal, whatever, the Humane Society's got one. You got all these colors for these little plastic bracelets. They cost nothing, you know, they're like nothing to give away. And I was thinking that at the conferences they could do one that either means I would like to get laid or I wouldn't like to get laid.
Yeah.
And you wear it to let people know, don't hit on me or hit on me, you know, depending on what they want to do. You wear the bracelet if you want to be hit on. And then I thought, if you were in a discussion with somebody, let's say you didn't want to get hit on, but then you meet somebody you really dig and you're like talking to them, you're like, wow, you know, I've not got the hit on bracelet, but you know, this person really sexually interests me. You could then reach in your pocketbook and like put the hit on me bracelet on. And it would be such a clear indicator to the person that you're talking to that, hey, I really dig you because like now I'm putting on the hit on me bracelet that they gave me when I registered. You know what I mean?
Well, a hit on me bracelet though is going to be used as an excuse. A hit on me bracelet would not be a grope me bracelet, but that's how some people would be taking it.
Well, then you'd have to have a grope me bracelet too. That would be like, I want to be groped. You know, please grab my breasts. It's okay to, you know, you just, here you go. We'll start with, you can touch any part of my body. Will be like the blue bracelet. And then like the green one can just be, I'm kind of horny. And if you want to talk to me, I'm going up for coffee, you know, whatever. And then if you don't have any bracelet on, it just means I am not sexually available. Don't even dream it. You know what I mean? I just think that would be such a good solution. It's like then the people who are there to get laid, that came to get laid and not really because, you know, or maybe they want the speakers and they want to get laid. I don't know what their deal is, but like you came there to you know, get some sex. You would know who else was there for sex and a conference. I'm not making a judgment that they're there just for sex. You know, it's like you're there for sex and a conference, and you can have the little I'm here for sex and a conference bracelet, and everybody. You know what it reminded me of? Beth might be. Oh, I'm gonna slap you, Beth, if you tell me you never saw this. Did you see Logan's Run?
Yes.
Okay. Are you just saying that because you don't want to get slapped, or you?
No,
really saw
I have actually seen it.
Okay. All right.
See, she doesn't even ask me because she knows I've seen it. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, me and you, we're simpatico. We're ancients, and so you've got the circuit, right? Logan's Run circuit. When you wanted sex, you put yourself on the circuit. And everybody knew you dial up the circuit when you're sitting around at home and nothing's on TV and you're just feeling like a little excitement.
There should be an app.
You plug in the circuit. Well, I'm saying the bracelet is like the circuit. Whoever's got the bracelet, they're on the circuit. Well, I'm interested. I'm single. I'm available. I want to be hit on. Feel free to come and talk to me. Buy me a drink. I'm up for sex this weekend.
Well, a bracelet might be a little too open for some people, but there are apps that you can get for your phone that connect you to people in your very area that are interested, and you
Well, I'm
could
talking about
talk
the
on.
conventions, though. The conventions. I'm saying that when you
Yes.
have it, give them a bracelet, and the bracelet either means I'm not interested in sex or I am interested in sex, and they can put that bracelet on, and then everybody's clear on who the group is that's looking for a hookup and a panel conference, and who's just interested in the conference.
You know what? I bet we could get, you're talking about an app. We actually know a guy who's an ACA member, John who moved to Houston. I bet we could get him to write an app for us that's like Grindr, only for the atheist conventions.
I like the name of it, Grindr. It already sounds better.
It's a gay hookup app.
Yeah,
oh my
it's a gay male hookup thing.
Those
Anyways,
guys, they just have such a hand. They're so open.
I know.
You know what I mean? They are just like so out there. You kind of have to.
But that would be good. I mean, if he could write an app like Grindr, and then people could have it on their cell phones, and I mean, it would probably light up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
There is just there's like no holds barred there, is there?
No.
But yeah, I think that some designation would be good.
Yeah.
If or maybe just they have like a singles night or just something where the people that are curious about, and that's the thing. It's like there are people that say I have trouble meeting skeptical atheist people in my area, and believe me, my heart goes out to you. I'm sympathetic. I understand a lot of the world is woo, and I get it. And I think this would make it easier if everybody was just identified as I'm single and I'm looking. I'm interested. I mean, is that a bad idea or is that an okay idea? To when you get the packet, you get the bracelet.
I don't know the bracelet. I think the bracelet is way too open for some people to feel comfortable wearing, and I think people would take it as more of an invitation than it was. But maybe some sort of app, maybe some sort of special single thing, maybe some sort of special dating thing. Maybe.
Have you seen the responses from these people, though? They need a red flag. They don't know. They have no clue. I mean,
the thing is, the concern I would have with a bracelet or, the handkerchief or whatever, visible signal is that just because you are open to the idea of a sexual liaison doesn't mean that you're open to every individual who might approach you.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's not a perfect system. Believe me, it's not a perfect system. But it would definitely take those people who are like, I'm not interested, out of the running.
Yeah.
That's kind of what my main thing is. It's like, if you're interested in playing that game, if you're there at the convention and that's part of your thing while you're there, you engage and you work it out. The people that want to date, that want to hook up, that want to have sex, you work it out however you want to work it out. You guys are the ones that are like, I'm there for sex and stop infringing on my style. It's like, fine, go have your whatever you're going to have. If I go to a convention, I just want to go and I want to see people talk. And I'm not interested in socializing, and I'm not interested, it's like, I really just would go basically based on a speaker panel. And believe me, I totally get and I sympathize with people who live in isolated areas. I don't live in one of those areas. I live in an area where we've got plenty of atheist socialization, and I get plenty of that. And so I'm not like jonesing for contact. But there are other people who are, and I hear from them, and my heart goes out to them. And believe me, I would want to see them provided with that, even if it's at just like these annual or biannual conventions. I wouldn't deny them that need. But at the same time, if they're highly social and they're looking for hookups, they're single, they want to meet other people, they're interested in dating, I just think there needs to be this divide, because there is this divide. And it's the crossover that's causing the problem. That's how I'm viewing it. Like when I see these dialogues, it's the crossover causing the problem. There are these people who are like, I'm at a convention to be at a convention. I don't, what the heck is this sex crap? What is going on here? And then you've got these other people that are like, what are you talking about? I never meet anybody, and this is my one time to meet, And it's like, you know what? There needs to be like a pool of the people that want to hook up and the people that are not interested, so that you can eliminate that crossover and have them designated in some way so that they can like mix and mingle.
Okay, see, that is where I think there is a flaw. I do not think the divide is as neat as you have stated. I think there are probably a ton of these people who've been harassed who were actually open to flirting and everything. They just weren't open to that one person. It's not, I don't think it's going to cut down on harassment as much as you think. There are people who harass people who are known to be in relationships just because they're assholes about it.
Right, I'm like in a relationship and I wouldn't have the bracelet. So if you hit on me, I could tell you, what are you, is there something like wrong with you? Are you a moron? I'm not wearing the bracelet. What made you think this was okay? And I would be perfectly reasonable in saying that if I'm not wearing the designation that says I'm looking for a hookup. You see what I'm saying? I think it would cut down. I don't think it would eliminate it, but I do think it would improve it.
I don't know. I'm of the mind that harassers are kind of harassers. Like, somebody walks up to you and harassers don't take account of rules. You're not wearing the bracelet. They'd be, oh, you're not wearing the bracelet. You have a boyfriend, da 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 da, and they just start talking to you anyway. I don't think we need such a system.
I think I would have clear cause at that point. At that point, nobody could complain if I said, you're a jerk. I'm not wearing the bracelet. What are you hitting on me for?
Well, I think that, given the fact that, we've all been open about our relationship status on the TV show and this podcast and nearly everywhere else, I think any of us who got hit on at an event would be perfectly justified in telling someone what an asshole they were for doing that.
I agree, but it's so weird because some people who are, quote, in a relationship go to these conventions thinking that this is the one time you get to take that ring off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. That's what I'm saying. So if you let them walk in the door and have a packet, there is this designator. You don't have to wear it. You can wear it. You can put it on later. You're not locked into wearing it the whole convention. But it is the signal that you're available. It is the circuit. Now, you remember on Logan's Run, right? He pulls up the girl on the circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And she says what? She's not interested. And he's like, well, what's the problem? You're on the circuit. And she said, yeah, but you're an enforcer or whatever they called him. And she's like, I'm not interested in that. And so she was still making a decision saying that even though I'm available sexually here on the circuit, you have disqualified yourself by being part of a group that I don't think is okay. Now, that would be up to the people that have designated themselves as open to that kind of conversation. They would have to dealing with whether or not they're interested or not interested with the particular people they meet. But I would at least stop people who are not interested in meeting anybody from being in that group, and it would give them legitimate basis for then going forward and saying, I eliminated myself from that group, this guy's still hitting on me, or this girl is still hitting on me. I mean, it could go either way. But once you say I'm out of, please exclude me from the circuit. I have not put myself on the circuit. Do not approach me for sex. I mean, I think that would, I don't know, maybe it would, maybe you're right. Maybe it just wouldn't be at all useful.
I think it would cause more confusion and more problems than just having a harassment policy that's well written and enforced.
Good enough.
Because the circuit, that's just nebulous, and I think it would cause people to focus too much on sex. There are people that go to these things just to get sex. There are people who would never consider having sex. And then there's a lot of people who are just kind of in the middle, what if having...
That's when you slide on the bracelet when you're in the middle of a conversation. I mean, to me,
now
that would be the ultimate...
That's way too forward for most people.
Oh, I think that is so smooth. It's just like, it's like you don't have to say anything. You put it on. The person you're with understands. You've made it clear without having to actually, be real proactive and out there. I thought it was smooth, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Of course, the really funny thing would be if you're in the middle of a conversation with someone, you're wearing the bracelet, and then you make a point of taking it off. Yeah.
But see, and that to me is smooth too, because it's just like you don't even have to say it. They get the message, you got the message, nobody had to say words, and All
Yes,
right,
I
well,
do, but
nice
not with
talking
you.
to you. I'll go talk to somebody else now. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just seems like to me, it seemed like a good signal. But I don't know. Maybe I'm dreaming. Maybe it's my utopia, my non-social utopia.
Yeah, I just think introducing something like that into the mix, it's too confusing. People are not used to dealing with such an open admission of, oh, I'm sexually available, I'm not sexually available. That person has a wedding ring. Maybe they're like 99% they're not sexually available.
I don't think it's
They're
99% at a convention.
well, that maybe, and there's lots of polyamory in the atheist community too. So that's
Yeah,
all
I
up in
don't
the
make too
air.
many assumptions. I mean, for me, it's like I think I'm too old to be interested. You know what I mean? That's the thing with me. And so maybe if I was way younger, it would be a whole different mode of thinking. At this point in my life, most of the letters I get that are like flattering letters are kids I'm just like, are you like the same age as my grandchild would be if I had kids? Because this is freaking me out a bit. But I kind of try to think in terms of like a younger generation. I'm totally out of that pool. I've not been in that pool for a long time, and I have no interest in being that. I don't even think about that pool anymore. But I don't want to make it hard for people. But I also don't want to make people get freaked out. I mean, there's so many people that are like, and believe me, I understand a lot of them are just passive aggressive freaks that are just like, oh, I'm afraid I can't even talk to somebody. I'm going to be accused of sexual harassment. It's like, no, you're not going to be accused of sexual harassment for talking to somebody. Just don't be Howard Wolowitz, And so you have this whole situation where you've got these freaks that are kind of like way out on the fringes, that somehow have become this massive center of a middle of the road dialogue. And it's weird because they're not middle of the road. The problem isn't middle of the road. Middle of the road is fine. And it's like the people that are causing the problem, they're not middle of the road. And I was on a program recently where we were talking about, someone called in about atheist men, blah, blah. And I was like, don't call this atheist men. This is people not respecting boundaries. I don't care if they're male or female. I don't care. You respect boundaries. Most people respect boundaries. There's a few people that don't. I don't want them defended. I want the sane men and the sane women in the middle to say, look, this is not sane. This is not normal. We don't ask people back to our hotel rooms that we don't know in an elevator at 4:00 in the morning. Nobody does that. Can we just cut through the crap and say, we don't do that? 99.9% of us do not do that. Don't defend it. It's nuts. And it maybe it was well-intentioned and just goofball. I don't know. I'm not saying put the guy in prison, whatever. I don't care. I'm just saying that most of us would not invite a stranger we just walked into an elevator with in a hotel in another country to our rooms at 4:00 in the morning unless we thought they were working that hotel. That's reality. And unless you live under a rock, I don't know. But that's reality. And so when we're looking at middle of the road, I don't have a problem with saying I'm available, I'm not available. But at the same time, I don't want to make people uncomfortable. But there is something to be said for the fact, and I think, Beth, you had mentioned the idea of having mixers or dances or something like that, where you can have like this approved time slot where there is like, you go there if you want to mix and mingle and you want to meet people. Something that designates that makes it appropriate so that you don't have to go out on a limb and hit on somebody and you're not sure what's going on.
Well, my idea was just for a dance generally, just because I wanted to dress up and dance. But yeah, it would have, a social appeal. It's still not an invitation to just hit on everybody willy-nilly, but yeah, a more social time that's different than just walking up to somebody and hitting on them out of the blue.
I might be being selfish. I mean, I'm thinking of it. I am thinking of it from a selfish perspective. And I'm thinking of it in terms of, if I went to a convention And part of the reason I don't is I'm not highly social, and the aspect of being surrounded by strangers does not appeal to me in the least. And so when I think about that situation, first of all, that's unappealing. But second of all, the concept of someone hitting on me in that situation is just like, oh, please no. And I wouldn't mind if, even if it was like, let's say it's an unofficial TAM. It's not even TAM. It's not even the convention. It's just like let's do this as an underground thing. I would be willing to wear a T-shirt that says something like, not available. Don't even think about it. I'm just out of that. I'm out of that circuit. Not in the circuit.
Well, I think... Okay, everybody, do not hit on Tracie. It's never been a problem. I told that story about how me and Matt figured out that a poly couple were kind of hitting on us, but they were doing it very subtly. And as soon as we just said, it was a discussion of polyamory, and we said, oh, we think polyamory is cool for other people, we're monogamous, and it stopped. I understand that. It was not a harassing thing.
No, I understand.
It's, if we'd had the bracelets that said not available, would we have been sending, this huge message that, oh, we don't even want to talk to people? Would that poly couple have even talked to us? I mean,
it depends. It depends on if they want to talk to you just to talk to you and not hit on you.
Well,
if they wanted to talk to you and not hit on you, they might have.
They did. Well, they did. We had a great conversation afterward.
There you go.
The thing was, would that have been so much of a stop sign? Would we have seemed so closed off if we had some sort of signal that they would have thought we were too uptight to talk to?
All right, well, then this is my issue because I'm cool being, I guess, viewed as that closed off. I'm okay with it. But if other people aren't, then it's a bad idea. And I'm cool with that, too, with acknowledging that that's a bad idea. But it's like, for me, it would work. But if it only works for me, it's not really a broadly applicable thing. So I'm cool with that.
Okay. Well, we are certainly, like, well over 2 hours now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is certainly something I think that'll come up as a discussion item on the Facebook page. So
I think they need a circuit. Good. I'm just going to say it one more time.
Well, we have Craigslist. Craigslist is today's circuit. Craigslist and Grindr.
The convention circuit, the skeptic convention circuit. And just like wear a T-shirt that says I'm on the circuit. Or I'm not on the circuit. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get myself printed a T-shirt that says I'm not on the circuit. And if anybody else doesn't want to be on the circuit, get yourself a T-shirt.
Well, open up a store on one of those sites.
Cafe Press, here I come.
All right. You should do it. Totally do it. Somebody will buy one off this podcast, I can tell you.
All right.
All right. Well, I think we are just going to close this thing out. All right, so thanks for listening, bitches at atheist-community.org. If you would like to bitch at us for anything we have said in this podcast, this is Beth signing out.
This is Jen signing out.
And Tracie saying goodnight.
Bye.